Good evening, cult members. So welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
Welcome to our spoiler discussion reaction review of episode 6 of The Acolyte. This one is called Teach / Corrupt.
Which one's doing which?
Yes. Yes. This is the aftermath of the slaughter that we got last week. And so this was a much slower episode.
Yep.
And some people may have a problem with that. I don't. We needed a pause to kind of, we needed a moment to kind of catch our breath and kind of dissect for us emotionally as the audience, but also for the characters more specifically about what just happened.
Right. Yep.
And it's very interesting that they start the episode. This is going to get confusing because now everybody's switched a role.
Yep.
Osha wakes up in some cave, walks out, and it's rocky shores, heavy tide, heavy waves. The ship's over there on another island, and then they do the credits, and then they come back to that spot and say unknown planet.
Yep.
And so, and ultimately, it's Chimere has taken her home.
Right. Yes. This is where he lives, obviously, because there's a bed and there's a fire and he's got a little swimming hole,
Right.
bathing hole.
Right. Leslie
He did
had
a lot of work on his body, so he needed to be able to
show
it off.
Right. Leslie Headland has talked about how she was a prequel kid, and she also did a bunch of the EU. And this episode specifically for me felt a lot more prequel-y, with like kind of the sexual tension that they tried. Not try, but just him taking all of his clothes off at the swimming hole,
Yeah.
and him, Chimera, kind of making sense of why the dark side is good, like Palpatine did, and just that kind of that feel, and then we'll get to the end of the episode and what that all entails and
Right.
stuff like that. But just that kind of that conversation of. She was influenced by the prequels, and a lot of the storytellers, Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, all of them, were influenced by the original trilogy.
Yep.
And so I just really appreciated that so far they have allowed her to lean into some of the ideas and tropes and thoughts that we got in the prequel movies in this modern Star Wars storytelling. Most of the episode with Chimere and Osha is talking about him very calmly telling his side of why she's there.
Yes. And ultimately it comes down to he's a Sith without a 2.
Right. Right, which I thought was very interesting that they used that terminology, that they used the power. I want the power of 2. Isn't that how he worded it? Or
yeah, something like that. Or the rule of 2.
So he didn't say rule. I would have remembered that.
Okay,
but it's definitely of the 2. I want the 2.
Yeah,
and because of the rule of 2. He feels like he needs to have somebody else there.
Right.
But he also doesn't come across, at least the way he's presented in for me here, he doesn't come across to me as a die-in-the-wool, by-the-book Sith master.
Well, and so I don't know all of the, I'm not steeped in the minutia.
Right.
So in like the books or whatever, like during this time period or prior, are there known Sith.
No.
So okay. So I wonder if this is the origin story
Of the Sith?
of the Sith.
So,
Just because there's been stories of them,
right.
if there
It's-
aren't any proven Sith out there, or maybe there were a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far and away, and he's just like, "Huh, this sounds interesting."
I think you're hitting like all around it. So, the Sith are known to the Jedi. The Jedi Sith wars are known in the history of
Okay.
So they know that Sith existed, and
At some point in time, a long time ago. Okay.
And Darth Bane, who was the one who ended the war by killing everybody on the field, including all of the Sith, and took an apprentice, and he's the one who created the rule of two.
Okay.
But that was thousands of years ago.
Okay.
1,000 years ago. And so the Jedi in the historical documents know that Sith existed. But at this point in time, they are not. It's been so long since one has been there.
It's almost a Bible story.
It's almost a
at
Bible
this
story, yeah.
Point.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Right.
he could be this.
And
Jesus sounds interesting. Let's go be him.
I very much think that they are going to play with that kind of general idea. That Chimere is the one who teaches Darth Plagueis the Wise or whatever.
Kind of starts the whole thing back up again to where we get to Palpatine, where we're at now.
That's a very fair, I think, thought process to have.
And it kind
to
of
reintroduce the idea of the Sith in this time period where the Jedi are at their height.
Yeah.
And they keep being blinded to the fact that there's this ultimate power going on, because even when Vernestra and the other Jedi showed up at the battle scene, he's like, this has got to be Soul. There's nobody else that has this kind of power.
Right, except she knows that
Right.
he was out chasing
Right.
a potential Sith. But it would also explain why in the last episode we got the little Kylo tinkle in there.
Yeah.
Kylo tinkle. And why this episode we get a very obvious reference to Darth Vader.
Right.
So that kind of the grandfather or the great-great-grandfather and maybe great-great-grandmother
Yeah.
of them.
They also threw in Palpatine's theme in there, and they also threw in Vader's theme. Somebody on TikTok, I believe, broke down the actual music, and it's like an octave lower or a beat slower, kind of thing. Kylo's one's the only one that I really recognize.
Yeah.
But once they kind of pointed it out, I was like, oh yeah. And I'm not like a music guy. I very much appreciate John Williams and Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman, and like I can appreciate, but that's usually like my second or third watch where I'm like, oh, the music adds so much to this.
Yeah, because you're busy paying attention to what's actually happening on
because
the
I'm a
screen.
visual person, and so I'm paying attention to all the little details in the background.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the idea that he could be the one who reintroduces the idea of the Sith back into this universe, and that he wants a pupil, he wants an acolyte, he wants another, he wants a two, he wants a number two.
Who does number two work for?
Makes a lot of sense, and it also makes a lot of sense with his comment, I was a Jedi student a long time ago. And Osha asks, how long? He says a very long time. So that idea that Palpatine puts in Anakin's head that Darth Plagueis had learned how to extend the life of his loved ones, that Palpatine uses, which is why he was a big bad in Rise of Skywalker. It's all laying out in front of you. Stop talking to the internet. That was the worst decision ever.
And that's how he gets Anakin like ultimately to cross over
Right.
because he promises to, you know, allow Padme to live
Help Anakin learn how to keep Padme alive.
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
a long, long time.
But this idea that chimeras, I'm going to keep going with my chimera. I know they call him the stranger. I sure will get an official name in the last episode. But,
Yeah.
like chimera is the way that he was introduced.
Yeah.
And so, but the way chimera spends all of his time with Osha, not poking at her, but poking holes in her mindset with the
Right.
idea that why did you leave the Jedi Order? Didn't the Jedi just throw you away? Didn't maybe you weren't good enough, or maybe the Jedi told you that you weren't good enough because you view the world differently. Like I kept adding this like layer upon layer, not forcing her into anything, not like just asking the next logical question to make her question all of the thoughts that she's had in her head the entire time that she was a Padawan.
Right.
And even now as an adult. And so having that thought process question ultimately triggers anger in her.
Right. Because, I mean, I think that that's part of why she became a mechanic, right? Because now you're, like, your whole existence is just on a ship, you know, going outside and fixing things and whatever. And people are generally leaving you alone. And I'm pretty sure nobody knew that she, you know, on that ship knew
Yeah,
she came
yeah.
from being a Jedi. So it's like a fresh start. So no one's ever going to interrogate her, or I mean not even interrogate, just ask the questions that she doesn't want to answer. She
Yeah.
would rather just forget about it all.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what's going to make, like he even points out that, you know, I should have known that May wasn't going to work because she was just blinded by revenge.
Yeah.
And ultimately I think that that may save May from, if this is where, if this is going where we think it's going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It may have saved May.
It may save me, yes.
It may save May. But Osha's more vulnerable to be swayed
Yeah.
to his side, where May was just like, you know, single-minded focus, I want revenge, and Osha's just kind of floating around out there with no purpose.
I like the idea too that she said, if you don't stay up with your training, you'll lose your connection to the Force. And he actually just questioned, "Is that what the Jedi? Or that's what the Jedi taught you? That's one view of it,
Right.
and you can still tap into the Force and your connection with it by things that are laying under the surface. Anger, passion,
Right. Strong emotion.
emotion, lust, like that kind of thing. And so I just love his manipulation in this episode. He never threatens her in any style. He never ever goes at her. He's always the calm one. He's always the introspective one.
Yep.
He's always there just asking the next logical question to make her think about what she's actually saying. He's playing and then
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
and then he's playing that game with her.
Yeah.
And it's a very unique, for me, I feel, it's a very unique way of presenting the dark side. Because he's not trying to manipulate her to come to the dark side. He's trying to manipulate her. He's trying to get her to open herself up to the possibility that there's other ways to view the Force.
Right.
Which is something they've already presented in this show.
Right.
And so it's not Palpatine manipulating Anakin to save a loved one. That's not what this is. There is
Right.
manipulation there, but
Right.
that's not what this is.
Right. It's it's manipulation, but just on a different level. It's like, you know, I'm trying to think of like an example of, because
He's like, I wouldn't even call it gaslighting, but it has very much that it has that kind of feel to it. Yeah,
and that's what I was gonna like Stockholm syndrome, gaslighting, kind of, all those kind of things combined, but very, very gentle, and just getting her to question these, and this is the problem, right? There's the Jedi are like, it is only this way.
Yes.
And
yes.
and ultimately down the line, the Sith will be, it's only this way. And nobody's allowed to live in the gray. And that's a problem.
Right.
Because if you belong to anything, if you subscribe to anything, religion, politics, your worldview, period.
Your favorite sports teams.
Favorite sports teams, yeah. And aren't open to listen to and examine another point of view, then, I mean, ultimately, you're wrong, even if you're right. Because you're not willing to listen to, and nobody's got all the answers.
Right.
So, why not listen to everything and form your own opinion?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the Jedi are ultimately going to do this to themselves.
That's the fun thing that I've had some people. There was a friend today on Facebook who said how badly the show has been written, and I didn't want to get into it with him because I want the show to finish before I actually really kind of get into that like conversation on a regular basis. But this idea that we are only presenting one view of the world is the idea that the Jedi are this steadfast, holier than thou, this is our way or the highway kind of thing, is just in the timeline of Star Wars. We are just now getting to that shift. Because in the High Republic, I hate to keep bringing that up, but the High Republic is directly tied to what this show is.
Yeah.
And in the High Republic, the Jedi are one type of Force user. And in the book, I think it's Battle of Jedha, they have a users of the Force, for lack of a better term, confab, with all the different types of people who view the Force, use the Force, are proprietors of the Force, and they have a big Council of Nicaea
convention, Force users convention,
right.
ForceCon.
ForceCon. There we go. ForceCon held at the Tropicana. No, that's being Caesar's Palace. But during that, the Nihil attack, and everybody was kind of on edge of that conversation, anyways. And then the Nihil attack, and then, but we haven't really explained from there, like kind of why we get to a point where because the Jedi are very open to other ideas at this time period in the High Republic.
Yeah.
By the time we get to the prequels, it's the doctrine. It's the only way.
Yeah.
And this show has multiple times introduced this idea that there are other ways to view it. And the Jedi aren't quite to the point where our way is the highway, but they did say, you can't test anybody without us.
Right.
And that kind of thing. And Chimere is presenting to Osha that maybe the doctrine that she was taught is not necessarily the only way to do it.
Yep, and I'm wondering now, as we're sitting here talking about this, if Soul's secret is that he killed everybody on Osha and May's planet because they were using non-Jedi Force magic, and this is kind of the beginning of, or maybe it's been going on for a little bit, but kind of on the down low, that they're going around and kind of eradicating these splinter groups, the remnants of these other...
That it may not have been...
They might not have been there to do that.
Yeah, but
That's
ended up
kind of an
happening.
underlying mission or an underlying directive that if they run into another group of people using the Force that aren't Jedi, that they should eradicate.
And I am totally here for that conversation.
Which would explain why everybody kind of left and went and did their own thing too, because they didn't feel good about what they had just done. They were doing what they were told.
It was the Jedi Inquisition. Nobody expects the Jedi Inquisition. We're going to make all the historical references tonight.
And nobody survives the Jedi Inquisition.
Nobody survives the Jedi Inquisition. The other thing I want to talk about is they talked about Kymir's helmet. Now, last week, after the show, StarWars.com came out and said, yeah, it's cortosis. Which is a thing from Legends that has been brought into modern canon. And then there was a whole Discord for about 10 minutes about why aren't droids and everybody wearing cortosis? Why aren't droids in the prequel area have cortosis to stop lightsabers and stuff?
Because there's on an unknown planet, island,
and they show the vein. I was glad that they showed the vein.
Yeah.
But in the Thrawn books, which is where the first modern addition to the story is where it was put in. In the Thrawn books, they talk about in there that cortosis is very hard to find, very hard to mine, and then once you do mold it into a form, it is great against lightsabers, but it's very fragile against everything else. And there's metals in the real world that are very much the same way. That if you don't quench them the right way, they shatter upon. And they showed that with Jecki last week, breaking the helmet, and then they showed Kymir rebuilding it.
Right, and that would be why he's only doing like the cracks.
Right.
I
wish they would have done it in a different color just to kind of give us one more clue that he's a Ren. That he is the Knight of Ren, and they did like Kylo's helmet with the Kumihimo. No, it's not.
Yeah.
That's not Kumihimo. That's the
right.
cord. Kamaki? Be nice in the comments, please.
Where they take broken pottery and they put it back together with like gold.
Melted gold. Yeah. I have a friend of mine who actually has a piece like that. That's really freaking cool. But in his talking about the helmet, he talks about that it's great against lightsabers, but it's also a sensory deprivation. And so all I take in there is the Force, and so he's able to cue into the Force a lot better in there. So he has a lot more. They talked about. In the very first episode, Soul is doing the teaching with the younglings, and he says, "Don't trust your eye. Don't use your eyes. You can't trust them." And so here's an example of where a member of the Sith or the dark side or whatever we're going to figure out what Kymir is, using a sensory deprivation helmet,
right,
to eliminate that eyesight.
Right.
And just open himself up to the
and he probably learned about that as a youngling.
As a youngling, yep.
That close your eyes. So this is even better.
Yeah.
You're not cheating and.
But in that conversation, he tells Osha, try it on.
Yeah.
And she said, I don't trust you. And he walks over with his box of parts that says you shouldn't. Why don't you trust yourself?
Yeah.
And because what you take it's like the dark side cave on Dagobah. You only take in there. You only find in there what you take with you.
Yeah.
And the episode ends with Osha very reluctantly looking at it, picking it up, and sliding it on, and we get the same visual of Anakin being put in the suit at the end of Attack of the Clones. No, Revenge of the Sith. And
then the breathing.
And no music, just the light, very dim light coming through the slit, and just her breathing. And like I said earlier, that Leslie Headland is a prequel kid. Having that visual story beat tied in with the musical beats that we got in the previous episode,
Yep.
tied in with this manipulation that is going on with Chimere, it's all the same beats that Star Wars is poetry. It all rhymes. And so here's this idea that you can be corrupted to the dark side by all these different things, but ultimately it's your decision to fall to that to fall that way.
Right.
You make the final decision to take that leap to the dark side.
Again, because there's only the Jedi way and the dark side, the white way and the black way, and there's no gray in between.
Yep. And I bring this up for me because a lot of people have been talking this week about, because everything that happened last week, and we had the Yord Horde have a funeral for Yord, and the tissues that were sent by Star Wars.
It was amazing.
Oh, so good. And I love Jackie, but people have been asking who their favorite character has been so far in the show, and I have found that I liked Jackie. I didn't like Yord for all the right reasons. I love his arc. I love his story, and I love Jackie, and I really love Soul. I have an asterisk next to Soul, but I have found that I've been more and more drawn to Osha because she is the one, I guess, pure soul in the show. She was the one who put herself out there to fix the fire in the first episode. She didn't put up a fight when she was being arrested. She was the one who let her sister go. She was the one who convinced Yord to go back and help because Chimere was kicking everybody's ass. Like she is the one who is the most Jedi-like in this show.
Yeah.
As we sit right now. So her questioning herself, her teachings, all of the things that she is, and ending on that shot is a one-for-one parallel for Anakin.
Yeah.
Except I think the idea ultimately is that Osha's going to have that moment where she's going to have to make the decision to take that final step to the dark side. And she's going to pull herself back. Because she was the one that stopped Soul from killing Chimere in the episode before, when Chimere wasn't armed.
Yeah.
And
I think she is the gray one, or she will be once she kind of understands what the dark side has to offer, or what the Jedis have kind of told her that's incorrect.
Yeah,
I think she will come out as
somewhere
as
in the
the
middle.
gray one. Yeah.
I agree. We could spend another 45 minutes on the two of them. Like I loved every time they went away from them, even though what's going on with Soul and May on the ship is super important.
Yeah.
It's that's the conversation for me for this show. Is the two of them and what it means to be Jedi, what it means to be not Jedi, and just like that. That is Star Wars to the deepest level for me. What it means to be good and what it means to be bad. And it's all perspective and what you're willing to tap into. I want to have that conversation for days. I'm here for that. Let's talk very shortly about Soul and May.
And Basil.
Basil figures this out, tells Soul. But before all that happens, we get Soul trying to call back to Coruscant and it not working.
Rebooting the router.
Rebooting the router. That's a reoccurring theme in our house. And Basil kind of finds Pip and recharges him, which that was a fun little scene.
Yeah.
And then he uses Basil to set a trap for May. And she gets squared in the face.
And before the internet explodes on why Saul didn't figure it out beforehand, because he has the Force. How come he couldn't tell that she
That's been a question that people have been asking.
Osha? He was visibly distraught.
Yeah.
I mean, he went down there to reboot the router and, slammed his hand on the table, and, he was thinking about 50 million other things
Yep.
besides trying to mind meld with Osha
Right.
to see
Right.
if she was who he thought she
Yep.
was.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. No. No.
stop that
That's.
conversation right now.
I was going to address that because I very much am the same thought. Like that is 100% for me. Why Soul specifically hadn't figured it out yet?
Yeah.
Because he just lost. Like we only know of his Padawan Jackie, and we know his relationship with Yord, but we don't know about the other the other
Right.
five guys that were
Right.
the other five Jedi were there, and he
Well,
could
and
have
it doesn't matter. They were his crew. He feels responsible for
and,
them.
right, and he's also carrying this guilt of whatever happened to Osha and May, and so he's got that clouding his judgment. He's got all this other stuff that just happened. He just fought a Sith Lord, which isn't supposed to exist.
Right.
Like he's got all these things going. So yeah, it was going to take him a minute, and I love what Lee John Yi Jay, is doing in the show is amazing.
Yeah.
Just that little 30 seconds with no words, only physical, only face, going through the emotions of anger, sadness, acceptance. I need to get refocused. In that little segment is just again, I could talk about that 30 seconds for an hour and a half because that is the Jedi thing. That is the Jedi not being careless. Jedi care. But they detach themselves from the emotion. They detach themselves from the attachment, the emotion of what
Right.
that brings.
Right. And he, in, what was that, the first episode, when he was looking through pictures or something, and Jackie.
Of Osha.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Jackie was like, I thought that, Jedi were supposed to not have these attachments because the past, whatever,
Yep.
whatever. And so you see that for him, at least, he's not hard and fast by that rule. He
Yep.
feels that, you do need to have some emotions, but like in this instance, he needed to kind of get through that quickly because there were other things going on.
Yep. Multiple times in this episode, he tried to like tell the story of what this thing he's carrying, and even May kind of pushed him to a point, and then the router came back on. The machine, the ship came back on, and then once he stuns her, he jumps into hyperspace as Vanestra and her crew show back up to the planet. And then the episode from their story arc ends with her tied to the medical bed and him saying, I'm going to let you go. I'm not going to hurt you. I've had 16 years to think about what I'd say to you if I had the chance. And you're going to sit here and listen to it. And so next week is going to be the other flashback episode that we all kind of felt was coming.
Yep. From his point of view.
From his point of view and not from Osha's point of view, which is what the other one was for. And so I think I kind of felt this one was coming, but I also feel like this is we talked about last week about the murder mystery of it all, in that you don't want to lay all the pieces out in front of everybody in episode 3, and then we're just kind of waiting for a cool lightsaber fight. There's got to be emotional stakes, and you got to spend time in the first couple episodes kind of setting all that stuff up.
Right. And I think the red herring, I think we were talking about last week with Brian Johnson and the Knives Out, where there's always this, in the middle, you're like, oh, this is the murder mystery, and then you find out, no, it's actually something else. So I think that the red herring is going to be that the murder mystery is not the murder of the Jedi in the first couple of episodes, because we know who did that. It was May.
Right.
And now we know who was behind May doing that.
Yep.
So the murder mystery is actually going to be May and Osha's family.
Yeah. The coven.
Yeah.
The coven. So I I'm here for Basil. I'm here for Pip spraying her in the face. It was
And whatever those things are on the island that Osha
with
and
the
like
trunk
elephant
things.
snouts,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they look like little rocks, and then they were like holding snouts with
Yeah,
their little
yeah,
baby.
yeah.
That was adorable.
I want one. I want like a little
Yeah,
like
of course.
whatever.
Star Wars making us buy more toys.
This is not even all of it. I can't even. I'll pan the camera up there and all the stuff over there. But yeah, I loved that. The only couple other things that I want to kind of mention is Vanestro. We got the light whip. It was exactly what I thought was going to happen. It was going to be Vanestro's on the screen. We have to remind everybody that she has a light whip. The internet may have a hissy fit about it. They kind of got ahead of it before the season started, because people were asking if we were going to see the light whip because we knew that she was in the show. And so I'm okay with all of that. Her taking somewhat responsibility by going out with this new group, because she's the one who sent them.
Yep.
Sent Soul.
She didn't send him, but she told him he went with her approval.
Yeah. So there's going to be that kind of conflict that for her and for him if they ever get back to Coruscant. So I'm cool with that. The one Jedi whose name I didn't get, I'm sorry, I'm terrible. Saying like how. This has to be Soul.
Yeah.
It's back to the conversation. There's no other explanation for the Jedi, so it has to be this. I think it's going to be a conversation that needs to be had once we get everybody back to
and
Coruscant.
They kind of started the episode with her talking to someone about the senator.
There was a senator from an Outer Rim planet trying to get into the system, and they're being fussy because the Jedi are the negotiators,
I think that
or whatever.
Might mean something.
I think that it could. It very much could, but I think that's much more of presenting the Jedi as this. Not everybody is willing to have dealings with them.
Yeah.
And if they're being pulled into, or if they want to be brought into the Republic, they have to deal with Jedi, and they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It just adds another layer to that conversation that the Jedi are kind of.
I mean, although we know that from The Mandalorian, but I guess if you didn't watch The Mandalorian, you wouldn't necessarily. Understand.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to deal with Jedi or the Republic or
the New Republic or all that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So, and so I continue to say how much I love this show. This was a like we said at the beginning, like this was let's everybody take a breath after what happened last week. So it's a much slower show, much more. Let's have conversation. I am here for that. I can be okay with having a break and just saying, okay, let's.
You need that's a storytelling kind of arc.
This is that last week was the first peak. We have to have a little bit of a calm down before we go to the final peak. Which will be the final reveal that maybe Chimera isn't the only Sith. Like he is the Padawan who needs another to go with him to kill the Master. Maybe. They kind of maybe hinted at maybe his scar on his back was given to him by his Jedi Knight, but he didn't answer the question.
Right.
Osha just kind of like, so your Jedi Knight gave you that, and he didn't answer that. He just kind of like.
Although maybe he turned on his.
Or maybe so there's still like mystery there with Chimera and all of that stuff.
Yep.
So if you are on the podcast feed on Spotify, please follow us there and share with your friends. If you're on the YouTube side, let us know in the comments what you thought of this episode and our discussion about it. Please be nice. It's very much required around here. We're willing to have a more in-depth conversation, but if you're going to be a douche canoe, I have the band hammer and I'll use it. Also, like this video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube as well. It's free. It helps us out. It means nothing to you. Hit the bell for notifications. So if you do want to see more of us, that's cool. And then all the social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links in the description down below. And until next time, cult members, for light and life.